In this video, we're going to take a look at some of the ultra-modern weapons slash futuristic weapons that are available inside of Command. The first one we're going to take a look at is hypervelocity projectiles. So in this case, we have the Zumwalt cruiser here, that's basically I should say destroyer, and we know that there is a sector control station not too far from here. Using an attack with this weapon is straightforward, and we simply select the unit. We can do a manual attack should we choose to do so, or we can do an automatic attack, in which case it will also launch its tomahawks. In this case, I don't want it to waste the tomahawks. So what I'm going to do instead is go over to our doctrine panel real quick and disable those as automatic attacks, because like I said, we'd rather save them for something that we're going to need a little later. So if we want to make this one for no automatic fire, we can simply work our way through and set all these manually. So after we've gone through and done all that, I'm simply going to order up a manual attack. I'll select the target, and I'll simply select how many I'd like to fire. In this case, I have 920 155 millimeter projectiles. We'll go ahead and allocate 50, which is probably going to be more than enough. And so we simply unpause and let the aircraft, or I should say the ship itself, start working out its targeting solution, and then it begins firing these projectiles one at a time towards the target until either we run out of projectiles or the target is completely destroyed. Keep in mind, these types of projectiles can also be used for the purposes of engaging air targets. In this case, we've identified one right off the nose. We'll go ahead and do a manual attack on this one. We'll go ahead and say 20. Go ahead and allocate weapons. And then as soon as it acquires a decent shot, it will automatically begin firing those directly at the target, in which case one of them was more than enough to do the deed. Now, hypervelocity projectiles are only one of these ultra-modern weapons. We also have a couple other weapons as well. We have two different types of EMP weapons at our disposal. We have directed as well as omnidirectional. Now, EMP in general is also covered with nuclear weapons in the sense that any type of electronic object can be affected by an EMP blast. So to demonstrate this effect, we've gone over to Nellis Air Force Base and we've gone ahead and equipped a group of B-52s with a bunch of different weapons for this purpose. In this case, I meant B-1s, not B-52s. We have a pair of JASSM ERs, one with directed EMP as well as one with omnidirectional EMP. So we're going to go ahead and launch these two units individually. We're going to try them out to see what happens. So to the northwest of us, so we have a small little base that we basically constructed for this purpose, and it has a couple different radar positions at that location. To use this weapon, we're going to treat it exactly the same way as we would normally treat any of these particular units that are going to be carrying any sort of waypoint weapons like this. We simply take it, we'll go ahead and order up a manual attack, and we'll go ahead and select the mock airbase as our target. Now note, in this particular case, even though we're attacking the airbase itself, the effect of the EMP will be able to hit all the radars nearby. We'll go ahead and fire one of those for each. We'll go ahead and attack that base as well. Again, we're bringing an indirect attack here, and they basically will launch their particular weapons. Now keep in mind, EMP has a limited range, and it is also a line of sight sort of attack. So depending on what type of EMP blast you create, will create a different scenario. In this case, our weapons are gliding towards the target. Now, immediately radars have been turned on. Keep in mind, any radar that has been turned on will be greatly affected by EMP. Also keep in mind that older radars have a little bit more durability when it comes to absorbing the blast of a particular EMP weapon as it arrives. We'll go ahead and switch to the other side so we can watch the impact of these particular weapons as they start to arrive. Notice that all of our different radars are turned off with the exception of our search radar, which easily identified it. The weapon moves itself in, strikes, and you notice these little lightning bolts to say that this particular item has been affected by an EMP blast. In this case, a couple of these weapons went sailing on by, and one of the missile batteries nearby with a very old-fashioned radar was outside of the effective range, so it was able to go ahead and engage it directly. These weapons now are retargeted, so in which case you can see as they were retargeted, they've come back around again and they've struck from more than one time, depending on what was going on. Now, if we zoom in a little bit and we take a look at our individual units, you'll notice units that were affected by the EMP have had damage, not physically, but to the actual systems on board. So if I were to take a look at their sensors, for example, you'll notice that they've been completely destroyed. So if I go here, you'll notice the radar is gone, but the eyeballs still work well, making it a very, very viable action for modern attacks against super modern surface-to-air missile systems. The final type of ultra weapon that we have for modern days is going to be the laser. Now, the lasers are kind of in infancy, so a lot of this material is going to be completely conjectural, but they can still be used operationally. So in this particular case, I'm going to take my Zumwalt, and I'm going to go ahead and target this desert floor here. I'm going to launch a total of 5 tactical tomahawks at it. Now, at this little desert fort, it is actually not completely defenseless. It has a group of these HELAD sections all around them with 60 kilowatt solid-state lasers. One thing I will do, however, is I'll make sure that their sensors are working properly to be able to identify the incoming weapons so that they're able to successfully engage it. So what I'm going to do really, really quickly is simply just add a little kind of battlefield control radar. We'll do a TIPS 43. Saudi Arabia is fine. And now we will watch the progress of these weapons as they start to approach us. So they've all been launched. They're crossing now. Keep in mind, this is God's eye view. You can't normally see this much, but they're traveling relatively low. We're going to monitor them as they approach. Turn God's eye view on and off. Oh, we spotted them earlier, but we weren't able to do anything about it because they probably ducked behind a small little tower. Starting to get a little bit closer. Keep in mind, these early lasers are very, very short range. Oh, we've spotted them. So now the fire control on these is automatically going to start acquiring these targets and preparing to engage them once they do get within range. We are no longer in a God's eye view. We're just watching the entire engagement directly. Keep in mind, each one of these tomahawks is targeting the center structure desert fort. These laser systems can be used against any type of aerial target moving at any velocity. As long as they can be acquired, they can basically be engaged. Keep in mind, there's airborne versions as well as seaborne versions. Once they get into range, you can see the lasers now engaging the individual tomahawks, and they were able to defeat the entire engagement. This concludes our video on the different types of futuristic weapons available inside of Command. Always, when something new is added or needs to be added, that can be done at a future date, but this is basically what you're provided with in the general database.